What's up, guys? This is Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's video, I'm going to be reviewing a quick 50-hand Snowy session of 6 max no limit hold'em. We will be taking a look at the the tools within the software to analyze some hands from the session. But without further ado, let's just get into the session, and then we'll get into the review after this. Under the gun +1 raises, and I decided to flat with Jack 10 of spades in the big blind. I think that's pretty standard. So facing pot, I think you can mix a check raise with this hand. It has a lot of equity against his range, but facing what I think is more of a polarized sizing and range, I think calling is fine. I think at this point, this is not a raise ever. I think this should be just a check call because I think he does have the range advantage as far as nuttish combos. I would have 3-bet a lot of combos that are nuttish on this board texture, so I think flatting with a hand that has decent showdown value and a lot of playability, I guess. Well, not so much playability, but it has a lot of equity on a lot of rivers that I pick up. This is not one of them, even though with absolute hand strength, I have 2 pair. I do not see a lot of bluffs in his range. I think one of the worst combos I would call with in this spot is possibly top 2. And for that reason, I think maybe his bluffs could be like King 8, but I don't even know if he has that in his range. So I can't really see a lot of bluffs, especially with me blocking spades. I think that is therefore an easy fold, and we'll see what Snowy says about that. I haven't really reviewed this session to see what Snowy says because I think it's nice to do these videos in the moment and really truly use Snowy to see where I'm making mistakes possibly and see how I'm playing. So we'll take a look at how Snowy thinks I did, and hopefully it's not horrific, but it's going to be tough to tell with 50 hands anyway. It's not really much of a sample. I do have enough hands on here for a relevant sample, and Snowy has me playing at a very high level, so I'm happy with that. Ace-5 suited, not a whole lot to talk about there. I think it's a nice combo to 3-bet against a big blind open raising range from the small blind. I don't want to be doing a whole lot of flatting. I want to be, I think, only 3-betting with, excuse me, guys, a pretty strong and linear range, so I think it's a pretty standard spot. Button versus big blind, this is a very common scenario in online games. I think that, yeah, I was going to say, I think a block bet works very well here because it gets the most value out of his whole range. He doesn't hit that board that hard, so I think a big bet doesn't do a whole lot in that spot. You could argue it, but I like a block bet. And on the turn, I would have liked a value bet because, so I got the most value out of taking that line out of his range, but I would have liked a value bet on the turn simply for the reason that our ranges are wider, and he knows that. And because I rep more bluffs, I think that I need more value hands in my range to balance that out. Therefore, King 10 is actually pretty darn high up in my range at that point, and I think that should be a bet more often than not. And I think Snowy will definitely let me know about that. So I think the check back isn't, I think I was thinking balance, and maybe I want to have some 10x on a lot of rivers in that spot. But I just simply think due to the relationship between how our ranges are constructed, I think betting again is definitely optimal. So this is an interesting spot. I think that I would want to 4-bet with maybe something like 10s plus and ace-queen plus, and then for my bluffs, maybe some ace-x combos, like suited aces. I wouldn't hate a 4-bet here. I think 8s is definitely on the line, though, and I think it's probably a fold most every time, I would assume, because I don't think I want to get as wide as 8s here. Even though it is a cutoff open and a button 3-bet, they should be as wide as they're ever going to be and within that dynamic where there's an open and a 3-bet. However, I just don't think getting that wide in that spot is probably optimal. So we'll see what Snowy says. I think it's okay, and I understand why I took the line I did, though. I think this should be a call facing a small bet or a small blind 3-bet. I think that my combo plays well post-flop against his range. It looks like I'm gearing up. Yeah, so I 4-bet. I don't hate that play. I think that what I was probably thinking is my combo is really weak, and I want to have some 4-bet bluffs. I don't want to get too out of line with my frequencies, though, against anybody that's optimal in that spot. I think that that combo probably is a call optimally, and probably every time, I would assume. So I think that's probably a slight mistake, and we'll see what Snowy says. As you guys can see, these are very fast sessions. That's why I like the PokerSnowie software. You can get a lot of hands in And then I'll show you guys within the software the tools that you can use to really evaluate your play and help you become a little more balanced and figure out where you're maybe getting out of line. If you guys do play in tougher games online or tougher live games, then it'll be important to know. So another spot where I could consider a 4-bet. However, facing an under the gun +1 open in a small blind 3-bet, I think those ranges are much stronger. I don't think my bluffing frequencies will be as high in that spot. I do think that is a decent combo to consider it with, and depending on your opponents, you could definitely throw it in more often than not. But I think in that spot, I like a fold most every time with ace-8. I think I'd rather have the baby suited aces and then my value hands. We'll again see what Snowy says and go from there. Okay, so another 4-bet spot. I was going to say possible 4-bet spot, but this is always going to be a 4-bet. I don't think slow playing and flatting here is going to ever be correct with this combo or with parts of my range even. I think this is definitely fine. With an SPR of 1 here, or a little bit over 1, I think that, yeah, I don't mind betting small. I think you can bet large. Also, I think I just bet small maybe to get value out of his entire range again. And I would like to maybe bet small with my bluffs there, possibly. I was going to say I do think he can have kings and queens in his range, along with jacks and 10s, maybe even ace-jack, even though I blocked that pretty hard. So I do think that's a spot where I just need to get it in against his raise, and it's always nice to cooler Snowy because it's actually tough to constantly beat Snowy. I do win against Snowy, but it's pretty tough to get, or I guess to have large winning sessions because Snowy just plays so good, to be honest, in my opinion. Facing the min raise on the button, I like flat. I think you can definitely argue 3-bet with this combo. And facing his bet on the flop here, he just has such a range advantage. I would have 3-bet. Often pocket 10s, my overpairs, maybe even my ace-10 combos, maybe pocket 7. So I think he has a pretty large range advantage. There's not much I can do in that spot. Just got to let it go. You guys just saw me fold 7-6 suited in the small blind against, I believe, a cutoff open. I don't want to be quite that wide with my 3-bet. I want to, I think, probably be more around like 9-8 suited, possibly. Maybe Jack-9 suited, that type of thing. So I do think that's a spot where you don't want to be too wide. That'll be it for the actual session, though. So just in about probably 20 seconds here, we'll get into the review part of this session. We'll go over some of the spots and see what Snowy says, and I'll definitely show you guys how to use the tools and how Snowy can definitely help you improve your games and become more balanced and tough against your opponents. All right, guys, so we are in the review part of the session. How this is going to go is I'm going to go over this hand specifically in full detail as quickly as I can. And then I'm going to go over basically one part of 3 more hands that I thought were pretty interesting from the session, just to show you guys a couple more hands, but just really overall to show you the tools within Snowy and how you can use it to become a better player. So in this hand, if you recall, Snowy opens under the gun +1. I flat with Jack-10 of spades in the big blind, which I think is very standard. And flop comes Queen-Jack-5. I think Snowy's going to have the range advantage here. He's going to have more combos of sets, of overpairs and ace-queen, possibly of 2-pair. I will have bottom set and top 2. I think maybe sometimes middle set, but not that often. I do think, though, that he's going to have the range advantage simply because his range is going to be a lot more narrow and strong opening from early position, where my big blind flatting range against 2.3x is going to be quite wide compared to his. So I do think he has a range advantage. I don't think I rep a ton of value combos on this board, so I don't think a lead makes any sense. I think check call or check raise is definitely the best option. Snowy bets pot, and my opinion on this spot is that when your opponent is representing a more polarized range with this kind of sizing, I think that there's less incentive to raise. And I think if I raise in the spot, I really am turning my hand more into a bluff. I think a raise is okay, though, simply because you can mix in a combo like this where you do have a jack in your range when you raise, and let's say that you turn a jack, for example, then you want to be able to have that at least sometimes, but more specifically because you do have a lot of equity that you're pushing with this hand. But I do think that calling is nice with a combo that does have some showdown value and does well on future board runouts where he has the range advantage. So If we go to Strategy Advisor here, you guys can see, and actually I don't want to look at it from this point. I want to look at it from the beginning here. You guys can see that at Showdown, I'm going to have the best combos 65% of the time, and my check raise success is going to be about 54%. So these numbers are important to keep in mind when you're considering what kind of lines to take. If we move down to where I have the option to call, check raise, or fold, he is going to lead with a little bit of a wider range than he will as far as like what he'll do against a donk lead. So now you can see how much showdown value this combo really does have. And this is why I like against this sizing a call more often than not. Now, Snowie is going to suggest some raises, I think at least some of the time. I haven't looked at this yet. So if you're going with like a small raise size, then it does, Snowie does suggest raising at some percentage with combos of 2 pair. You do have some 1 pair combos where you have your Queen X. And then some basically draws, some flush and or straight draws. I think that in this spot, I would like to size my raise up a little bit. And if I was going to raise, you guys can see that's definitely at a much lower frequency. So I do like call in this spot. I think raise is certainly arguable for some of the time, but I do like call. And you guys can see there, I'm not going to go through every combo just because I think it'll take too long for the video, but you can see that Snowie will show you what to do with different, or what it suggests you do with different parts of your range against his range and for certain bet sizes and raise sizes. So I do think that's pretty cool. Turn is the king of diamonds, and at this point, I don't think lead again does anything. Snowie bets small for a block. So this is very interesting. I think that Snowie could be going for value with a hand like King 10 now, or Ace King, or maybe something like Ace Queen, where it's trying to get a hand such as mine to call, like hands that, or parts of my range that are Jack X. I think Snowie can do this, understanding that I'm not going to be able to raise this texture all that often because I simply just don't rep as many good value hands as he has. So I think this bet works very well for him. And instead of maybe checking back a combo like King 10, Jack 10, something like Ace Queen, this allows him to play tough in position, and it forces me to have to put more money in the pot and to be kind of handcuffed in the spot. So I really like Snowie's line in this spot so far, and I do expect this to be balanced to where Snowie will show up sometimes with some Ace 10 with something like Pocket Queens, but because of this bet, it really merges him a little more to definitely combos of like Queen X, I think, and possibly stuff like Jack 10, like my combo specifically, maybe something like King 8 if he did have some King 8 suited in here. So I do think this is an interesting spot, and I do think that calling is definitely the only play. Snowie agrees with that. I just don't think, like I said, raising will be profitable, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense based on pretty much everything I just said. So river is a 10 of diamonds, and this is where a lot of novice to intermediate players get in trouble. They think about absolute hand strength instead of relative hand strength. Yes, I have 2 pair. It's hard to make 2 pair and hold them. But when I check and he fires half pot, this is a really difficult spot for Snowie to have air. And the problem is that I think I'm supposed to call with top 2. It's probably the worst combo I'm supposed to call with. Maybe King Jack, but I think that's getting a little wide. And it's just a matter of frequencies, like how often am I going to have straights and 2 pairs here, and what am I supposed to do with those specific parts of my range? I think that because I'm going to have combos of either King Queen or King Jack or both, or well, really King Queen and then possibly King Jack, I think sometimes he'll show up with like maybe King 8 here, but I don't think he has much air. So I think that to balance out this bet, he's going to have something like pocket 8s maybe, pocket 7s or 6s, in his lower pocket pairs that he obviously is raising here to balance out his value hands because he just doesn't have air. So if we go to his range, and this is what's nice, is you can see what Snowie suggests for everybody's range and what line they should take in that spot. So obviously he's going to be value betting his straights. And for that half pot sizing, I think he can definitely throw in some sets. So yeah, you got your sets there. And as I suspected, he definitely has some combos of these pair blockers that could block some 2 pairs that I might call with. And then the bottom of his range is going to be made up of those small pocket pairs because he just doesn't have air in this spot. And because some of his bluffs are, or I should say because he doesn't have much air, and he's just going to be so value heavy in the spot. And I don't think a lot of regulars really in a lot of stakes will even bluff enough on this type of run out. They may, just because they understand that they should have the range advantage here. I mean, I do think I can have a lot of ace-x combos, but I just think it's going to be tough for me to really do much against this bet. So I do think fold is the correct play. And yeah, Snowy says calling is a significant mistake, at least as far as EV is concerned. Raising is obviously terrible. It does nothing. So I do think that hand was played well, and I think there's a lot of interesting tools, like I said, that you guys can see within Snowy that you can use to really understand what you're supposed to do in this spot. If you want to see I'll show you the pre-flop tool when I get to a new hand. So for the sake of the video, like I said, we're only going to go over one part in each of these next 3 hands. So if you guys recall, in this hand, I opened the button. I'll show you pre-flop real quick just so you have a good basis. I opened King 10 offsuit for a min raise, and the big blind goes ahead and decides to defend. And just don't pay attention to his combo right now. I mean, obviously he had Queen 6, but I do like block on this board simply because I think it definitely maximizes my my EV against his whole range. He's going to have to defend pretty wide in the spot. But like I said, I don't want to get into different parts of the hands. I want to go over specifically the turn in the spot. So you guys can already see the red here. And this is what I suspected, that Snowy's going to consider this an error. And I think the reason for this is because we're both so wide in this spot, and because of how wide I am and how often I will be bluffing, I do think that this hand fits darn near the top of my value range, essentially. And I think I need to be betting it because I think he's going to be defending a lot wider. So Snowy thinks, yeah, so Snowy suggests actually betting 100% of the time. I was wondering if there was some frequency of checkbacks with 10x, and I'll look at the hand or the range advice, but you can see it's a little bit of a mistake. Checking's not horrible, but betting's definitely the better option. And I think for the reasons I stated, that I agree with that. So let's go to range advice real quick and see what exactly I'm doing with all my 10x here, and I guess other combos as well. So you can see we are betting essentially all of our combos that are better than ace 10. Wow, yeah, so all of our 10x, and then even our pocket 9s, 8, 7s, just because of how wide he is defending. So yeah, I think this is definitely a spot to go for thin value against a range that's a little wider that has to defend wide against us, and against a range that I don't think I'm necessarily getting check raised by a whole lot. So yeah, I do think this is a very interesting spot, and a spot that I need to understand the dynamic a little bit better, and I think I just, when I get playing against opponents that are similar to Snowy, whether it's a tough opponent I need a balance against, I think I worry about balance a little too much sometimes to a fault. And so I do think that I need to understand the dynamic here and how our ranges are constructed and what my perceived range looks like on this turn. So I do need to be value betting this combo, I think, pretty much almost every time, and I agree with Snowy on that. So interesting hand, good little spot to clean up something small, I think. All right, so I thought this one was interesting. Snowy 3 opens in the cutoff, Snowy 4 3 bets, and I have pocket 8s in the big blind. So real quick, let's see. I did go ahead and 4-bet and got 2 folds, but I do think this is a little wide, and I don't know if it's necessarily not profitable, but I don't think that I should be wide in this spot. Let's go to pre-flop advice, and we'll use this tool. Yeah, so you guys can see that Snowy suggests folding or raising only 3% of the time. So I tend to agree with that. I did say that I thought it should be 10s plus. I did say I believe that you've got your better suited aces. It looks like ace-queen off for your squeeze for one of your worst combos for value, essentially. This is more like value slash a bluff, I would say. It's a little more merged, but I think a lot of this is mostly value. You have a flat with king-queen suited, jacks and 10s, and some bluffs with those ace X combos. And I did say I like the baby suited aces a little better. You've got your ace 5 and ace 4 suited. The reason that these numbers are a little random is I think Snowy is taking into account a total frequency, essentially, so you don't get out of line. And it's not like you have ace 8 suited to ace 2 suited and you're always going to squeeze these. You're going to do it at some percentage to balance out your value combos. So I do think I was a little wide in that spot, and I agree with Snowy on that. But I don't think – I think You just need to understand the spot, the dynamic, and how our ranges are constructed. You have a little bit wider of an opening range in the cutoff as opposed to the under the gun player here. The button's going to know that, so the button's going to be 3-betting a little wider than, let's say, if the under the gun player opened here and then the small blind were to 3-bet. That's going to be 2 stronger ranges, and our understanding of how their ranges are constructed will make it so that we aren't cold 4-betting as often in this spot. So I think it's just a matter of the dynamic, and you have to be a little careful about getting a little wide here, but you also need to understand that you don't only need to have only aces or kings in the spot, or something like queens plus an ace king and then one combo of like ace 5 suited. You need to understand how their ranges are constructed. If you guys are playing in like lower stakes games, especially live poker, an open here and then a 3-bet, these are going to be much tighter ranges usually, so you don't need to be balanced in squeezing here with combos like this. But if you are playing in a tougher game or a higher stakes game, then this will have to happen sometimes. You just want to be careful about your frequencies and how wide you get. So I think that's going to do it for the video, essentially, and I was able to show you guys some tools within Snowie. I think it's a very great piece of software that will help you understand balance and understand how you need to play against tough opponents and take into account how opponents and players' ranges are constructed and the relationship between the dynamic and how it goes. How should I put this, guys? I'm trying to not butcher this at the end of the video. Essentially, understand the relationship between the ranges and what each player is trying to accomplish and what your perceived range is. I think all of this is very advanced stuff. I think if you guys start to progress in your poker careers and you don't have any software, this would be a decent piece of software to go ahead and purchase. So I'm going to try to link the URL to the site for Snowie so you guys can take a look at it and get a little bit more info, I guess, and maybe take, I think they have a couple quizzes. You can play some hands and take the quiz and see how you do. But if you guys have any questions or comments about this type of video or any of the hands I played or any of the tools within Snowie, go ahead and let me know. Until next time, this is Nick from Arch City Poker. Take care.